and welcome to the very first installment of Horror Hangout Bitesize. Horror Hangout Bitesize or Horror Hangout Bite-sized? I'm not sure what it should be. I think I can stick with bite-size, although bite-sized also works, I believe. As long as you're aware of that, before you get pointing out a mistake, I'm aware that bite-sized is also a thing. I feel like I'm spending too much time worrying about that, so I'm just going to proceed. I'm going to move on, okay, very swiftly. So, Horror Hangout Bite-size is essentially Patreon-only content, Patreon-only bonus content. And the reason we've decided to move forward with this is because I'm well aware that we've probably made a lot of promises to deliver bonus content in sort of long form. We've talked about ranking episodes, we've talked about bonus longer episodes, retrospectives, and the like. Now, we still are going to do those. However, based on the amount of time it takes to record and edit those episodes on top of our weekly output, you know, putting out a weekly 3-hour, 2-hour long episode about a movie, you know, can be a lot of work for us in particular. So we don't want our patrons to believe that we're skimping. I'm struggling with words today. I do apologize. I don't want our patrons to believe that we're purposely skipping out on the bonus content. We are going to try to be more consistent with it. And this was just an idea that me and Andy were knocking about with. And we thought it was a good idea to put out some bonus content that was smaller, easier to digest, which is relevant about relation to the film I'm going to be talking about. Easier to digest, sort of like mini episodes, mini reviews, with just one host. So nowhere near the length of a main episode. However, let's say 10 to 15 minutes of discussion about, I mean, it could be longer than that, could be shorter than that. Don't know how long I'm going to go for. About a particular horror movie that doesn't fit in with the realms of our usual episode output. And then hopefully we can do different themes for these miniature bite-sized episodes. We can do reviews. We've already talked in the past about pitching remakes, pitching sequels. Maybe we could do some news-related stuff. Or I think it's going to not limit we're not going to limit it to one particular theme. So this is the first installment of that, of Horror Hangout Bite-size, and we are going to talk about, I keep saying we, I'm so used to saying we. Rarely is it is very rare that I do anything solo, just talking to myself. So it feels kind of strange, but we'll move forward and hopefully create something that patrons are going to be happy with, because we're very, very grateful for the constant support. You know, some people have been supporting us on Patreon for a long time, months, probably like over like years. I don't even know how long it is we've been on Patreon now. I think over a year we've been on there. So yeah, we're very, very grateful for the constant support on that, and we kind of want to give something back that perhaps is in addition to, because I feel like all we ever post on Patreon is kind of like, here's the new episode, or like a day earlier. And I don't know, it doesn't feel like that's quite enough for, you know, some of the levels. We may need to revisit the price of some of the levels to work out exactly where this bonus content fits in. But for now, if you're on Patreon paying anything, you're going to be able to see this, and it's not going to go on any other platform. It's not going to be available on YouTube for everybody to view. It's not going to be available on podcast apps as well. It's only on Patreon. So of course, give us feedback on if you enjoy this sort of bite-sized content, and if you want to, and what else you want us to do. I think we're going to be really open to suggestions from our patrons as well for what you would like us to cover, because it's going to be a lot easier for us to put together the content, as I said, in the shorter form. So I'm waffling. Today I'm going to be talking about a movie called Alligator, which is a 1980 American independent horror film directed by Lewis Teague and written by John Sayles. It stars Robert Forster, Robin Riker, and Michael V. Gazzo. It follows a police officer and a reptile expert who track an enormous, ravenous, man-eating alligator flushed down the toilet years earlier that is attacking residents after escaping from the city sewers. So yeah, rather than sort of covering everything else we cover when we discuss these movies, like the IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes rating, and all the reviews, I'm going to briefly take a look at Letterboxd. So on Letterboxd, it's got 3.3 out of 5. You know, that's pretty respectable, I believe. And I'll just give one, I'll just talk about one review, I guess. Well, I'll just talk about the reviews in general. I think a lot of people think it's a bad movie. It's a bit dull on the whole, but it's a serviceable creature feature. I'm happy to go one step beyond that, and say it's a great creature feature. I think it delivers everything you could expect a creature feature to deliver. The effects are good. Like, this is 1980 as well, you know? The effects are good. Well, I say the effects. I think a lot of it is like an alligator, but in like a minute with miniatures surrounding it, so it looks like a big old overgrown massive alligator. The deaths are gruesome, like it's ridiculous and over the top, like serious B-movie vibes. And the alligator feels like a Jaws level threat, and I think that's important because a lot of creature features can be, you kind of see it. For example, I did watch Alligator 2 pretty much immediately after this, like the next day, and that everything that this film gets right, Alligator 2 kind of gets wrong. And it never really feels like a threat. There are a lot of sequences where you look at it and you go, is it even that big? Whereas this one, you really do understand the size of it. And it's a great lead performance by Robert Forster, of course, of Jackie Brown fame. He's in Breaking Bad as well, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive. There's a really weird sort of like, again, I'll get a little bit into the plot, but there is a really weird constant ribbing of Robert Forster's hairline. Now, I don't know whether it's the director, the writer, or whether he's decided to include that himself in the film, but there's like 4 or 5 different mentions of the fact that he's thinning on top, which just feels completely unnecessary and unfair. It is honestly also is incredibly strange because, I mean, I think he's thinning a little bit on top in this film. It doesn't look terrible. It's not super noticeable. It just feels like it's clearly a point of contention for the actor or the character. Who knows? And they decided to make it front and center in this, and it's got a bit of a sort of tongue-in-cheek comedic value to some of the scenes, but it's not like one of those B movies that is front and center with the comedy. It is supposed to be threatening and a bit sort of scary as well. Apparently it received praise from critics for satirizing genre cliches, but I don't think the satire is incredibly is incredibly front and center. And the sequel, like, I think the sequel is like a direct-to-video sequel. The satire is probably a bit more there, but doesn't quite land, I would say. It's got no characters in the sequel or actors from the original. And rather than it being like a direct follow-on where they've gone, oh, all this stuff happened with an alligator before, and now it's happening again, it's almost like a completely separate alligator-based scenario, I guess, which is kind of strange. Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of stuff about animal testing, and I think if you feel a bit I mean, sure, people find alligators cute. There's a baby alligator in the start, which is super cute. So it starts with like a teenage girl. She purchases like this baby alligator while on vacation in Florida and returns home, and she's keeping this alligator in like a tank with no water and loads of multicolored rocks. And I feel like, oh yeah, and toys. Like the alligator's gonna be bored in there. Got a little toy bus for you in there. That's nice. Yeah, why not? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But out of nowhere, Dad just like flushes this alligator down the toilet. Just suddenly seems really bothered. Like, she's not even there, the girl. She's like at school or something, and he's like, oh, I'm sick of this alligator. I've had enough. It's going down the toilet. There we go. Harsh, I would say. Incredibly harsh. And then we've got like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle scenario where it's not like toxic waste or anything like that, but there are animals that are being tested on by this pharmaceutical company. And they're the bodies of these animals. So I say animals, they're like dogs, they're like pets that a pet shop owner is scooping up off the road, looking like, oh, he's going to save those pets, or some of them got collars on, so we don't care if they've got an owner. They're being tested on by this pharmaceutical company, killed essentially, and then the same guy is dumping them in the sewers. Don't know how much this guy's getting paid for it. I'm assuming you've got to be a bit of an animal lover to like start a pet store. This guy has no regard for animals whatsoever, dumping the bodies. So the bodies are test subjects for an experimental growth formula, which is going to be used in like agricultural livestock meat production. And these animals, when they're discarded, little baby alligator, who's called Ramon, by the way, Ramon, can't do that. And what's kind of cool is that gets, the only cool thing about the sequel is that there's like a couple of characters called Ramon, and I think there's something else where you're like, oh yeah, you do the Leonardo DiCaprio meme point where you go, oh yeah, that's Ramon from the original. So obviously this tiny little alligator starts eating dog bodies, an old dog's body, and grows massive, and it's supposed to be like 12 years later, I think. And then the standard creature feature thing of where people are just getting killed in various scenarios, bodies are popping up everywhere. And then it is Robert Forster as Detective David Madison's job to get to the bottom of it, and find out what's bloody going on here then. Is it a massive alligator? And of course, everyone's doing the standard, an alligator in the sewers. And I guess it's kind of like based on that New York urban legend, and I think this takes place in Chicago, but obviously in New York there's an urban legend about alligators being in the sewers. So yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle scenario. This alligator doesn't learn kung fu. He isn't taken in by a sensei who's actually a humanoid rat. He just grows big, and obviously after eating loads of dogs, decides, you know what, I've got a taste for human flesh. He kills the pet shop owner fairly early on in the movie, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he starts ambushing, devouring sewer workers. Body parts are turning up all over the place, and I guess David Madison is a world-weary police detective, a very, very cliche, lives in a bit of a shitty apartment, has no real time for any personal relationships, is kind of like all about the job, as we see in lots of things. But it's an interesting addition to this sort of creature feature as well. And he gets introduced to herpetologist, which is zoology, I think, Marissa Kendall, who, of course, to link this back to the origin story of Ramon, is the girl who had the baby alligator. And she even mentions that as a story. Yeah, I used to have a little baby alligator. They don't make a connection to Ramon. Now he's grown big. There's no like moment of recognition where Ramon's about to bite her and it goes, oh, it's you. You used to own me when I was teeny tiny. And she recognizes him, and then they make friends and team up Kong and Godzilla style. No, that doesn't happen, which is good, I think. But yeah, so Marissa and David enter into like a bit of a romance. There's this romantic subtext, not subtext, but there's a romantic storyline going through alongside Killer Alligator and stuff. And I like it. I believe it. It's described as like prickly, I guess. Two very different people involved in a relationship, but I think it suits the film as well. It's not like one of those romantic storylines that's just forced into a film and it feels pointless. It feels earned. Yeah. And essentially, of course, there's a story that's unearthed as well about this influential tycoon who's been sponsoring the illegal experiments, and he wants like the truth concealed. There's a tabloid reporter as well, and he kind of gets on the wrong side of David Madison as well. David Madison has got a bit of PTSD because his partner was killed previously. I mean, he's classic like police officer, world weary police officer stuff, lost his partner, kind of blames himself. And yeah, this tabloid reporter, he's like the bane of Madison's existence. He goes in the sewers looking for the alligator. This alligator can't be real. This is ridiculous. David Madison's off his head. Goes down, takes some photos just as he dies, essentially. And these photos are like the official evidence that, yeah, there is a massive alligator in there in the sewers. The story like gets loads of public attention. There's like a manhunt, alligator hunt for the monster. Call it a monster. He's just misunderstood. Poor Ramon. Been through a lot. And so essentially what happens towards this point? Oh, there's a couple of good sequences. So the alligator, when it actually escapes from the sewers, it gets flushed out, essentially. It was flushed out of the toilet. Now it gets flushed out the other thing. It literally comes up through the street, which is great. A great sequence. Obviously, everybody runs, is terrified, kills a police officer. And then this is brutal. Like, it kind of reminded me of like the Blob in a way, where it doesn't care about just killing kids. Like, kids are put in the line of fire and murdered. Not murdered, attacked, eaten, killed by this alligator. There's like a terrifying bit where like there's a party. I don't know why it's at night. There's a party at night with some kids, and they push like another kid into the swimming pool. Alligator was in there resting. I don't know how he wouldn't notice it because it's massive. Kills the kid. Blood in the water. Terrifying. And that, I guess, dials into like a real childhood irrational fear. Like, we've all been in a swimming pool and thought, there's a bloody great white shark in there somewhere. I need to look around with my goggles on just to test, just to see if it's there. So yeah, that's pretty insane. And then also, like, the alligator goes on a rampage at like a wedding in the middle of the day. It's like something out of the Godfather Part 2, where it just, not the alligator bit, but like the high society wedding scenario, I guess. And the alligator comes out, kills people, it kills a maid, like ripping people apart, and it kills the mayor as like the chief scientist. I keep doing this, but that is ignore that. Whereas the chief scientist, who's like involved in all these hormone experiments, he gets killed. He gets absolutely crushed in this car. The alligator just smashes, and that's the thing. It doesn't just kill people with its jaws. There's a lot of hitting with tail, which is nice. I enjoyed that. There is like a big game hunter called Colonel Brock, who's added into the mix, but he's just as fodder for the animal, really. I thought he was going to have a bigger part to play. He like hires some like some random guys off the street. I think he meets them outside outside a liquor store, and like gets them to come with him to help, I guess, or like hold his gun while he's tracking the animal. But yeah, he gets killed as well. And you kind of do feel that the alligator is unstoppable, essentially. Unstoppable, but also for its size, and I don't know how fast it is, constantly evading the police as well. So yeah, Madison and Kendall, they finally lure the reptile into the sewers and essentially set off some explosives. There's a really kind of tense moment where Robert Forster's character is trying to escape. He sort of set these explosives on the alligator. He's trying to escape up through the manhole cover, and some stupid old woman has driven onto it. She's parked on top of the manhole cover. He can't get out. And Madison is kind of like, sorry, not Madison, Marissa Kendall is trying to get her to get out. Get out of there. There's someone down below trying to get out for the manhole cover. And she's like, what? I don't understand. There's a garbage truck in front of me. And she gets out, drives it out. But she would have died because the explosion like goes right up out of the manhole cover. But just in time, Marissa manages to get the car out of the way. And yeah, the alligator is exploded. I guess that's the only way that this sort of era of creature features, the only really real way to know it's dead is by exploding it. We want to see big old chunks of it flying all over the place. And there is like a bit of a thing at the end where they're like, a drain pipe like spits out another baby alligator. I don't know where it's come from or what it's doing, but I think it's trying to suggest that sequel, the cycle's going to start all over again, even though the pharmaceutical company, the pet shop owner, all the tested on dogs, everyone involved is dead. So the chances of this very rare scenario happening again is probably very slim, but still. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend checking out Alligator. It is available on Shudder in the UK. Don't know where it's available internationally, but I would seek it out and give it a watch. I would give it a B, and the reason I would go just for a B is probably like as serviceable a creature feature you can expect in 1980. And if you enjoyed that sort of stuff, I felt this is going to be right up your street. Alligator 2, nowhere near as good, but still kind of watchable for like the weird little quirks it's got going on with the characters and stuff. Also, some shots are actually recreated. Sorry, not recreated, but completely ripped from the original. There are a couple of shots where you're just like, that is exactly the same shot as the original. And they've just taken it and gone, yeah, whatever. So it feels a bit lazy in a way, I guess. But yeah, in terms of like killer alligator movies, if you're into things like Lake Placid, which I've not seen for years, I've not seen Lake Placid for years and years. I know it's a crocodile, Lake Placid, but potato, tomato, alligator, crocodile. Sorry, it's probably really ignorant of me to say that, but still, great creature feature. As I said, the effects, it really holds up for a film that's like over 40 years old, and came out along the same times as like what Piranha was 78, Orca, the killer whale, that's 77. Definitely got to check. We definitely need to do that on the podcast, even if we do it in this sort of bite-sized form. But yeah, I highly recommend it as a decent creature feature watch. And Robert Forster, hairline and all, poor fella. Don't mean to bring attention to it again, but the film brings attention to it enough. Robert Forster's hairline gets absolutely humiliated throughout. Maybe he's into that. Maybe he's got a humiliation kink, possibly. But yeah, recommend it. Check it out if you can. And thanks for watching this first installment of Horror Hangout Bite Size. As I mentioned before, if you enjoy this stuff, amazing. And give us some suggestions of what else you'd like us to talk about in solo podcast form. And we'll see if it takes off. Well, I say takes off. I'll see if we're more consistent with it. I'd like to be more consistent with it because, as I said, we value the support we get on Patreon every month, and is without you guys, a lot of the stuff we're doing probably wouldn't be as fun as it is. So we love that. We love the interaction with everybody who listens. So yeah, please get in touch. We will on social platforms as well. But yeah, this stuff's going to stay as patron only Horror Hangout bite-sized content. So thanks very much for watching. See you very soon. Bye-bye.